Well, the University of Fort Hare has recently come under the spotlight after an attempted hit on its vice-chancellor, Professor Sakhela Buhlungu. The VC's bodyguard was shot and killed after dropping off Buhlungu at his residence on Friday. It's alleged that a probe into corruption at the university may be the reason for this assassination attempt. Now, according to the SIU, corruption at that institution dates back as far as 2012. Let's unpack this issue further. Melusi Ncala is a senior researcher at Corruption Watch, and he joins us on the phone lines this morning. Melusi, great to have you with us on the program. Universities as fertile ground for corruption. Is this a new trend?
Good morning, Michelle, and good morning to your viewers out there. 2012 is more or less time when Corruption Watch was established, and from the onset, we started receiving reports of corruption from members of the public. And last year, we released a report titled Sound the Alarm, in which we highlighted approximately 3,667 reports of corruption, which accounted for 10% of the data that we received during that period, which highlights corruption incidents in the education sector. And TVET colleges, as well as CETAs and schools, were the areas that we looked at. And so for us, it was not a new phenomenon, seeing that at least for a period of 11 years, members of the public have been coming to us with various accounts of corruption.
So you're saying over 3,000 reports of corruption broadly in the education sector, not particular to Fort Hare?
No, not particular.
But it gives you a sense, right?
Yes, definitely. We're talking about cases relating to misappropriation of resources, maladministration, which is apparently a case that is currently being looked at Fort Hare. These are issues of mismanagement of funds, etc., etc. But also there's abuse of authority, which relates to the victimization of whistleblowers as well as violent treatment of whistleblowers.
The sense that those who are watching the story is getting is that it's a probe into the awarding of dodgy degrees and irregular contracts that may well be behind this apparent assassination attempt of the VC at Fort Hare University. What does that tell you about the extent of what appears to be a criminal syndicate, particularly at Fort Hare, and what they are willing to do to protect the corruption at that institution?
We need to think of educational institutions is that they mirror what's happening in society. So if we think of it as a criminal syndicate, it's largely what we have now, unfortunately and sadly, have become used to, that, we're living in a criminal infested society where we have machinations of a mafia state essentially happening. And now we have a situation in a university, a place where people go for hopes and dreams to pursue them at the very least. And now we have situations where whistleblowers are being violently treated. This is the story of South Africa, and this is the story of a nation that is dealing with rampant corruption from the highest office to institutions like your education institutions, like universities, for example. So it's very worrying, it's very concerning, and it's something that we have called government on to do something drastically on, apart from just paying lip service.
And Professor Buhlungu himself has apparently made excellent strides over the past couple of years in addressing issues of corruption at Fort Hare University. And it makes sense then, right? It follows on that this attack on his life was coming. Yes,
definitely. But then we need to ask ourselves the question, what are the South African police services doing, law enforcement, the investigative bodies, what are they doing to protect whistleblowers? Do we have sound legislation, for example, that can address some of these concerns that whistleblowers have? People are scared of blowing the whistle on corruption, even though we have many brave whistleblowers coming forward.
So, Melusi, how do we address this now? You've talked about the importance of good governance at universities themselves. Professor Buhlungu has done the same. He talks about how universities can be impenetrable to corruption if they've got good governance in place. Outside of that, there's also been a call for a presidential proclamation to protect whistleblowers at this institution as well. But how do we close off those taps? How do we root this out?
Yeah, well, Michelle, I guess that's a million-rand question when it comes to dealing with corruption in South Africa. We've had the commissions. We do have the laws, that are in place to be able to deal with effectively with corruption. But we need to empower our institutions, keep on putting in people with integrity into those institutions that will be able to deal decisively. And we need brave leaders who will actually stand up and say, not in my name shall this happen. But in South Africa, that's not happening at the moment. At the moment, we have we're still grappling with whether we're going to have a whistleblower agency as mandated, for example, by the Zondo Commission. That is an area that we need to look at to say that, do we have an institution, a government-led institution that will holistically deal with issues of whistleblowing? And then we also need to look at the Protective Disclosures Act, for example, to say, how does it view whistleblowers? Is it still a narrow interpretation in terms of it being employees only, or also members of the public? So there's a wide range of issues relating to psychological treatment for whistleblowers, financial incentives as well, and also just looking at their well-being to say that are their families safeguarded against criminal syndicates.
Yeah, the VC of Fort Hare University goes around with a number of protectors at any time, as does his wife. His children also have protectors at all times at school as well. It's disingenuous in a way, Melusi, isn't it, to call upon the bravery, the so-called bravery of whistleblowers, right? When their lives and the lives of their families are at risk, and when, as you say, it appears we're only paying lip service to this issue of protecting whistleblowers.
Yeah, but that's a political issue, though, Michelle, because what are our politicians doing to protect whistleblowers? Do they use whistleblowers simply in situations when they stand to benefit as office bearers? I'm looking at civil society organizations or social justice movements, for example, where they've made great strides in ensuring that whistleblowers are protected. For example, Corruption Watch, we have received over 40,000 whistleblower complaints over the past 11 years.
Sure.
And, we go through all means possible, at least as far as we can as an organization, to make sure that that data is safeguarded, but we also use that information effectively to teach members of the public about corruption trends, and also to bring attention to all of these issues.
And while all of this is underway, while we try to ensure good governance at our education institutions like Fort Hare, students themselves continue to face their own issues insofar as the education sector is concerned.
Yes, definitely. Think of education institutions as where tens of millions of South Africans go to actually pursue their dreams. If we say that institutions like these are vocationally driven, surely then by all means we should be attracting people with integrity. We should not be talking about the administrators, for example, sleeping with students so that they can be given higher grades, for example, or at least certificates. We should not be talking about friends and families being hired who are not qualified to actually be in position, or at least dodgy companies being awarded tenders, as seems to be the case in most of these TVET colleges and universities.
Closing the taps of criminal syndicates now operational in our institutions of higher learning. Melusi Ncala is a senior researcher at Corruption Watch. Thanks very much for joining us this morning.